comes from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 4. So now, Israel, give heed to the statutes and ordinances that I am teaching you to observe, so that you may live to enter and occupy the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. You must neither add anything to what I command you, nor take anything from it, but keep the commandments of the Lord your God with which I am charging you. You must observe them diligently, for this will show your wisdom and discernment to the peoples, who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, surely this great nation is a wise and discerning people. For what other great nation has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is whenever we call to him? And what other great nation has statutes and ordinances as just as this entire law that I am setting before you today? But take care and watch yourselves closely, so as neither to forget the things that your eyes have seen, nor to let them slip from your mind all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and your children's children. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
We'll read responsibly the psalm that's printed in our celebrates, please. Lord, you may dwell in your tabernacle. You may abide upon your holy hill.
Those who speak a blameless life and do what is right, who speak the truth from their heart.
They do not slander with the tongue. They do no evil to their friends. They do not cast discredit upon a neighbor.
In their sight the wicked are rejected, but they honor those who fear the Lord. They have sworn upon their health and do not take back their word.
They do not give their money in hope of gain, nor do they take bribes against the innocent. Those who do these things shall never be overthrown. And our second reading this morning is from the book of James, chapter 1. Every generous act of giving with every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. In fulfillment of his own purpose, he gave us birth by the word of truth, so that we would become a kind of first fruits of his creatures. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Therefore, rid yourselves of all sordidness, and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. But be doers of the word, and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in a mirror. For they look at themselves and, on going away, immediately forget what they were like. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. If any think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Please stand as you're able.
They noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. And they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are many other traditions that they observe, the washing of cups, pots, and bronze kettles. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" He said to them, "Isaiah prophesied rightly about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'The people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandments of God and hold to human traditions.'" Then he called the crowd again and said to them, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There's nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile. For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Girls, you want to come up? Good morning. How you guys doing? Have a seat. You can sit there. There we go. Well, do you know what a law is? What is a law? That's a vowel. A law is like a rule, okay? For example, you see these red signs that are big on the highway and they say S-T-O-P, stop? What's that mean? You're supposed to stop your car, right? You're driving along, you see a stop sign. The law says you must stop, right? Okay, so that's what a law is. It tells you what to do. Well, now, when Jesus' disciples, some of his friends got into trouble because they didn't do something very interesting. Were you listening to what they didn't do? They didn't wash their hands before they ate. Now, do you wash your hands before you eat? All the time? Every time? Even before you eat a snack? Maybe not. Okay. Now, if we don't do that, does that mean we're bad people? No, it's just that we're not being healthy, right? And we know that washing hands is good. You know, it's good to wash your hands, especially now we need to watch what we're doing. So we wash our hands a lot, or we use that special antiseptic stuff on our hands, right, to keep them clean. But that's good. But some people were telling Jesus' friends that because they didn't wash their hands, they were bad people. Now that's silly. And that's what Jesus kind of said. He says, you know, it's not whether you wash your hands or not that's important, but what's important is what you do. But do you help people? Do you love Jesus? Do you love God? Do you help other people? You know, that's what's important. It's kind of what we do, not little things like washing hands and so forth. Okay? So that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to help other people and love God because he loves us. Thanks very much. Good to see you. Doesn't mean to say that a person's hands are dirty. It could be that their hands are soiled. You know, a mechanic, if he's going to work on your car, generally has dirty hands because they're working a lot of grease and a lot of dirt, and their fingernails may not be as clean as other people. Okay? A farmer or a rancher, if they're outside working, they're going to accumulate dirt probably all over their body, especially if it's one of those windy days and they're working around a lot of stuff. But they're doing these things and they're helping other people, and we hold them up as examples because we think it's a good idea to have dirty hands for doing things like that. But what if we say that a banker or a politician or maybe even a preacher has dirty hands? That's another story altogether, isn't it? Yeah. The disciples were eating with dirty hands, as I talked about it with the kids. And that's what the Pharisees believed, that you always have a chance to do the niceties that other people do. After all, they lived in a different world. Maybe they lived in a real world. You could kind of put it that way. But for the Pharisees, not doing a simple thing like that is sticking out like a sore thumb. It's like going to a fancy restaurant and picking your teeth, like, while you're done eating. That just isn't done. It's not good form to do that. And the Pharisees were big on form. Somebody's got to stand up for what's good taste. After all, if you don't have good taste, what will happen to society if it goes away? Traditions have to be kept. As one person put it, the Pharisees were the type that were opera goers in a world of boom boxes cranking out urban rap. They watched masterpiece theater on public television while their unwatched neighbors watched Bachelorette. Somebody has to save our culture from the degradation of common taste. Well, it's easy to make fun of the Pharisees, but they were people who helped keep up appearances. They were the guardians of good taste. They were, in a sense, the gatekeepers of tradition. Mark writes that the disciples were eating with dirty hands, the scribes, the Pharisees were bothered by it. Then Mark gives this editorial comment. The Pharisees and all Jews, he tells us, do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders, and they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are also many other traditions they observe, the washing of cups, pots, and bronze kettles. Tradition is important. Tradition is an interesting thing. It has its pluses. It's helped our Jewish friends maintain their identity throughout the centuries when you think of all the persecutions and so forth that they have suffered over the years, and yet they keep their tradition. Now let's face it, today we're encouraged in hygiene to keep our hands clean, and to, as I said, use soap or use special cleansers so that we're kind of keeping down the germs if possible. So tradition can be good. It has its drawbacks. Somebody's illustrated that with an experiment. He said if you put 5 monkeys in a cage and hang a banana on a string above a set of stairs, soon one of the monkeys will notice the banana and start to go up the stairs. Well, the minute he touches the stairs, cold water gets thrown down and splashed and pushed on the other 4 monkeys. Soon they learn that if somebody touches the stairs, they get cold and wet. And so they start guarding the stairs against somebody touching it so that they don't get cold and wet. Okay, so now you take away, after a while, you just kind of let this happen, and then you take away the cold weather, the cold water, and then take one of the original monkeys out and put in a new one. The new monkey sees a banana, doesn't know the tradition, goes to the stairs, and is immediately attacked by the other monkeys, because the rule is you don't go on the stairs, because if you do, you get cold and wet, even though they don't get cold and wet anymore. But they know that that's what you're supposed to do it. Now take away another of the original monkeys. And again, the same thing happens. And soon the group keeps learning this tradition that nobody goes up the stairs. Eventually you take away all the old monkeys and replace them with all the new monkeys, and they eventually have all learned that nobody touches the stairs. Nobody knows why anymore, but they don't do it. After all, it's always been done that way, hasn't it? And that's a lesson that maybe the church needs to learn too. We need to be careful about what tradition we need to honor and what tradition we need to sort of let go. Does our tradition keep us from doing what's important and being effective today? The disciples were breaking this sacred tradition by not doing the ritual washing of hands, and it made the Pharisees angry. Traditionalists has a way of making others upset. Back in 1904, 10-year-old Virginia Carey Hudson wrote these words as part of an essay for school called Etiquette at Church. Before I go into the house of the Lord with praise and thanksgiving, I lift up mine eyes into the clock tower, from whence cometh the time to see if I am late. It is not etiquette to be late. Do not hop, skip, jump, or slide in the church vestibule. Tip all the way to your seat Be sure not to sit in another person's pews. Jesus wouldn't care, but other people would. And that's the point, isn't it? Did God really care if the disciples washed their hands or not? But you see, other people did. A church growth specialist a number of years ago wrote an interesting book. His name was Bill Eason. The book was Sacred Cows Make Gourmet Burgers. A great title. And then he goes on to write about churches and what they do. And one of the churches they wanted to do was to describe about how churches kind of always do what has always been done. He told about a church that was over 100 years old. It was in a large city. But in the past 30 years, it had been declining because the area around it was declining as well. But it was still a big church. 400 people still came to church and worshiped every week. But over the past couple of years, as often happens in an urban area, the place gets redeveloped, and young couples start to move in, buy cheaper homes, fix them up, and live closer to work. So 2 or 3 of these young couples found their way into the church. And then they asked the church to provide a paid nursery for their kids. Well, back in the good old days, the nursery was across the hall and from the worship center. But about 30 years ago, the Ladies' Aid had taken over that, and they had closed it and used it for that instead, and moved the nursery down into the basement. Now, the basement was kind of damp and musty. So the young couple went to the pastor and asked about starting this nursery and providing a paid sitter. Pastor told them that basically they had to talk first to the trustees because they're responsible for the building, and then they have to talk to the finance committee because it involves money. Hearing that, the couple took a deep breath and proceeded to do that. Well, they met with the trustees, and the trustees said yes, the nursery could be started, but it had to stay in the basement because the women's organization had turned this nursery into a beautiful parlor. Now, the parlor was hardly ever used, but the women had put a lot of money into it, and it was a beautiful place. The finance committee said that they wouldn't authorize any funds for a paid babysitter because when their kids were growing up, they didn't need one. Well, the nursery was established in the basement. However, they still needed some space to store some things, and some of the things were still stored in the new nursery. The basement was still a little damp, and the carpet still had some ugly stains in it from unknown origin. The young couple offered to spend their own money to pay a nursery attendant to come and be there, but they were told that the church doesn't encourage designated giving. Well, 2 years and several thousand new couples moving into the area later, the church still declined and kept growing older, and a few young couples that had once been members moved on to a more friendly church. William Eason then concluded the story. A report came to me from the defeated pastor that the church leadership was convinced that they had done the right thing by refusing to spend the money to move the nursery and pay a sitter. After all, the young couples weren't committed enough in the first place, so they wouldn't have left. Kind of sounds like maybe that church ought to have some kind of a barbecue to use with their sacred cows that they've got. After all, we've never done it like that before. It's the seven last words of the church, as they say. The Pharisees were good people. Actually, they were some of the best people in the community. They were simply trying to uphold the traditions. And the sad thing was that it kept them from being effective in their service to God. The Pharisees and the scribes asked Jesus, "Why do you